The atmosphere in the kitchen of Harbor and Hearth's Brooklyn Harbor location that morning was as thick as the salt-laden air rising from the sea outside. The sound of oil sizzling mixed with the rhythmic thud of knives on wooden cutting boards, yet beneath that familiar layer of noise was a tension anyone stepping inside could feel instantly. Ethan Cole, a 45-year-old man and CEO of the entire renowned seafood restaurant chain, quietly stood in the employee entrance. A worn baseball cap was pulled low over his face. The stiff polyester uniform, still smelling faintly of factory starch, felt foreign against his skin. Cheap sneakers replaced the polished Italian leather shoes he usually wore, and his bare wrist lacked the Swiss watch that had long been part of his public image. Today he was not Mr. Cole, the man who wielded executive power over a 78-location empire. Today, he was just a brand new trainee who had only just signed his onboarding paperwork. He was here because the dry, impersonal internal reports and cold numbers couldn't explain why the Brooklyn Harbor branch, once a star performer, had slid into decline so quickly. Ethan had braced himself to see lazy staff or an undisciplined head chef. But on his very first morning, what he encountered instead was a voice like a knife through the steam rising from the fryers. "If you can't handle the basics, then stay out of the way." The woman behind the remark was Riley Torres, the shift lead at this location, somewhere in her 30s, lean but solidly built, her hair tied back to reveal a sleepless face and eyes sharp enough to cut through the chaos. Riley had no idea that the new guy standing in front of her was the owner of the entire operation. To her, Ethan was just another face sent from corporate, the kind who usually quit or got cut within weeks. He extended his hand as if to introduce himself, but Riley glanced at it and turned away, leaving him with clipped instructions delivered like orders. Tables 8 through 15. Write the orders clearly, don't promise anything to customers without checking with me, and absolutely no comped dishes unless I say so. The menu's on the wall, learn it as you go. And don't count on Trevor to help. Our boss never shows up before noon. 15 minutes later, Ethan was in the middle of a storm. Customers streamed in nonstop, the kitchen bell rang relentlessly, and the scent of grilled shrimp, steamed clams, and garlic butter mixed with the faint scorch from the old oven. It had been more than 20 years since he last carried trays of food, and it showed in his hesitant steps and clumsy hands. Table 12 ordered raw oysters, but he forgot to ask which sauce they wanted. Table 15 kept reminding him about a special dipping sauce he still hadn't brought. A child spilled their fruit juice, and while Ethan hurried to apologize and clean up, he missed 3 tables waiting to pay. Sweat soaked his back, and the salty air clung to him, making him acutely aware of the gulf between management theory on paper and the cramped, grinding reality of the kitchen. Riley passed by, carrying a tray of drinks. She glanced quickly at his order pad, then dropped a remark. "Table 10's been waiting for seafood knives for 5 minutes. He tried to explain that he was overwhelmed, but Riley was already walking away, tossing back a blunt. "So is everyone. Either keep up or step aside." There was no softness in her tone, yet amid the sharp commands, Ethan began to notice something else, a strange rhythm within the chaos. Every time Riley gave an order, the head chef adjusted a dish, servers changed their routes, and customers still received piping hot meals on time. She handled complaints, checked ingredients, even fixed the coffee machine all in one morning, missing nothing. Without Riley, the place would have been drowning in disorder. The contrast only deepened when Trevor Miles, the official manager, finally strolled in close to 1 p.m., hair slicked back, shirt pressed to perfection. He made a quick lap to greet a few regulars before disappearing into his office. He didn't touch a single operational task. Staff didn't seek him out for guidance. They simply murmured, "Ask Riley, she knows everything." The morning passed like an endurance test for both body and nerves. Just when Ethan thought he'd seen enough, he overheard a seasoned employee quietly tell a newcomer, "She's been carrying this place for years, but no one upstairs ever acknowledges it." The words stuck in his mind like a knot begging to be untied. Ethan knew he didn't yet have the full picture, but his instincts told him that behind Riley's hard edges and tired eyes was another story, one he would have to uncover if he hoped to save this branch. The next morning, Ethan arrived much earlier. His watch read just 6:20, yet faint footsteps already echoed inside the restaurant. The atmosphere was nothing like the chaos of yesterday's peak hours quiet, rich with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and a faint briny breeze drifting in through the cracked door. He carried a large cardboard tray filled with hot coffee from a small shop down the street. Without saying much, he handed a cup to each cook, server, and even the dishwasher huddled in the corner. The reactions were not loud, just a few nods, a couple of soft thanks, but in their eyes was a flicker of surprise. Only Riley was different. Standing at the seating chart, she glanced at the coffee box, then back up, raising one eyebrow. "Trying to buy people off?" Her voice was dry as sandpaper, but Ethan answered calmly, "Just thought we could start the day with a little warmth. We're on the same team, aren't we?" Riley gave a faint, humorless smile, shook her head, and turned away with a short reply. "Team, that's a funny word." All morning he made no effort to force conversation. Instead, he hung back and observed like someone standing at the edge of a stage, watching the whole play unfold. Within a few hours, the suspicions from the day before crystallized. Riley didn't just oversee the dining area. She stepped in when the grill charred the tuna, personally corrected a salad missing its toppings, and called the produce supplier when the morning's delivery fell short of standards. When a young cook panicked over a special order, Riley moved in beside him, guiding each step while still glancing toward the bar to check drink orders. She was the hinge that kept the entire operation connected. Without her, everything would splinter apart. With her, the gears kept turning, even though the main axle had long since rusted. In contrast, Trevor and Samantha, the two people being paid to manage, were present in an entirely different way. Trevor spent most of his time behind a closed office door, emerging occasionally to shake hands with regulars and smile like a social figure. Samantha wandered the floor with a tablet, occasionally jotting notes in a black notebook, but no one approached her for help. Not because they didn't need it, but because they were long used to getting no answers. Every lifeline in the building led to Riley. Close to noon, Ethan found a chance to speak with Carlos, the middle-aged dishwasher with a salt and pepper beard and a steady, sharp gaze. When Ethan subtly brought up Riley, Carlos looked around before speaking quietly. "She's kept this place standing for years. Trevor takes the credit, and when there's a bonus, well, you know who gets it." Ethan didn't comment, but he filed the words away. A picture was forming in his mind, but one crucial piece was missing. Why was Riley still here? Why would someone carry an entire operation on their back and not walk away? That afternoon, as the lunch rush thinned, Ethan was wiping down the bar when he spotted Riley sitting alone in the break room, holding a worn photograph. In that moment, her face had no sharp edges, just exhaustion, almost emptiness. He started toward her, but the creak of the wooden floor made her look up. She quickly tucked the photo into her jacket pocket. "What are you still doing here?" she asked, her tone back to its usual chill. Ethan replied simply, "Just closing out the bar. You look tired." Riley let out a short laugh, but it was dry as gravel. "Tired is my default state." Her phone buzzed, the screen flashing an unfamiliar number. Seconds after answering, her voice changed, completely tense, urgent. "I'm his daughter. How bad is it?" "No, don't call an ambulance. I can't afford that. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When she hung up, she slowly rubbed her forehead, eyes closed for a few seconds as if gathering strength. Ethan asked softly, "Family?" She nodded once. "My dad. Late-stage Parkinson's. The night nurse just quit." Then she stood, grabbing her bag. "Unless you can make rent cheaper or hospital bills smaller, there's nothing you can do for me." Out in the parking lot, Ethan froze when he saw the old SUV. The back seat was piled with blankets. The front held a bag of personal belongings. Riley caught his gaze and pressed her lips together. "Just temporary. 3 months. Sometimes I crash at a friend's. I'm fine." But in that moment, Ethan knew with certainty the problem with this branch wasn't just in the numbers on the reports. It was the story of a person pushed to the edge, still holding the place together so it wouldn't collapse. And if he was going to save this place, he would have to start with her. That night, Ethan barely slept. The image of Riley quietly slipping a dinner roll into her bag, then putting on her coat and walking into the dark to drive off in the vehicle that had become her temporary shelter, replayed in his mind over and over. It wasn't the fact that she took food from the restaurant that stayed with him, but the way she did it, no attempt to hide it, no embarrassment, like it was nothing more than a basic act of survival. It wasn't the behavior of someone sneaky, but the sign of a person long accustomed to no one caring. By nearly 5 a.m., as the first pale light crept through the window, Ethan opened his laptop. He sent a few short emails and made a handful of calls to key departments in the company: operations, legal, finance. Without revealing where he was or his exact purpose, he requested access to certain internal data and asked for one particular key, the code that would unlock the security system of the Brooklyn Harbor branch. Less than an hour later, he was at the restaurant's back door. Instead of heading to the kitchen as usual, Ethan turned down a narrow hallway toward a long, neglected, dust-covered room, the security monitoring hub. The screens were dim and smeared, the hard drives humming faintly, the whole place looking as though it had been forgotten since the day it was installed. He powered up the system, logged in, and began scrubbing through the last 30 days of recorded footage. Within minutes, his blood was running hot. On the screens, Trevor, the polished manager, could be seen now and then quietly sliding bills from the cash drawer into his pocket while counting funds, or taking an envelope from the safe and tucking it straight into his briefcase. Samantha never touched the cash directly, but she was repeatedly altering figures on her tablet, occasionally leaning in to whisper to the host before Ethan in his cover as the new hire walked by. But the footage that held Ethan's attention the longest wasn't the embezzlement. It was the shots of the restaurant after closing, with only a few kitchen lights still on. Riley, alone, methodically mopped the floor behind the line, checked the dry storage, repaired the espresso machine Ethan himself had struggled with for an entire afternoon. At one point, she counted her own tip money, then discreetly slipped a few bills into the busser's share because she saw they hadn't gotten enough. There was no audience, no thanks, and certainly no report to upper management. Ethan leaned back in the chair and exhaled. He began pulling up the last 6 months of customer complaint records for the branch. Most of the responses were signed by Trevor, written in a templated style that blamed insufficient staff training or subtly implied Riley had been negligent. He cross-referenced the complaint dates with the camera footage and immediately saw the truth. In one case where a customer claimed Riley refused to serve a gluten-free dish, the footage showed her carefully pointing out the allergen section on the menu and explaining in detail. In another complaint about slow service, the video revealed Riley repeatedly pushing the kitchen to expedite the order while Trevor lingered at a table chatting with regulars. This wasn't just poor management, they were setting Riley up as the scapegoat for the restaurant's collapse. Ethan knew he had more than enough reason to act. The door to the room swung open and Carlos appeared, momentarily startled to see Ethan sitting in front of the monitors. "What are you doing here?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Ethan stood, stepped closer, and extended his hand. "I need you to be honest. And before you ask anything else, I'm Ethan Cole, CEO of Harbor and Hearth." Carlos blinked, then let out a short laugh. "Really? So this undercover boss thing is actually real?" Ethan gave a slight nod. "But for now, it stays between us. Tell me, what is Riley really like?" Carlos crossed his arms, his voice dropping low. "She's the best manager this place has never officially had. Works doubles, takes all the tough shifts, trains people who don't even want to learn. She sent 3 reports to the company about Trevor, everything from food safety violations to inventory fraud, but nothing ever changes." He shook his head. "Now she's burned out, but she's still here because she's got nowhere else to go." Ethan turned back to the screen, watching Riley move between stations like the steady pulse keeping the whole body alive. And he felt it clearly. This was no longer a story about procedures or revenue. It was a fight against abuse of power, neglect, and injustice, one that the woman on the screen had been carrying alone, and he wasn't going to let it continue. Ethan didn't wait another day. The next morning, he arrived in a charcoal gray suit, freshly pressed, a crisp white shirt buttoned to the collar, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. The trainee uniform and worn baseball cap were gone. The disguise was over. At exactly 8:30 a.m., he walked through the front doors of Harbor and Hearth. Brooklyn Harbor, not alone, but accompanied by the head of operations, the company's legal counsel, and 2 members of the corporate security team. The restaurant wasn't yet open, but inside, staff were busy with preparations. The sound of knives on cutting boards slowed, a few heads turned, and some froze altogether as the unfamiliar group entered. Trevor, stepping out of his office, tried to maintain his polished smile. "Sorry, the restaurant isn't open for guests." His words trailed off when Ethan stepped forward. "Trevor Miles?" Trevor blinked. "Yes, that's me." Ethan tilted his head, his voice clear and firm. "Ethan Cole, CEO of Harbor and Hearth." The color drained visibly from Trevor's face. His eyes flicked toward the back, where Ethan's trainee uniform from the day before still hung on a hook. "If I had known—" Trevor began with a strained smile, but Ethan cut him off. "That's exactly why I came this way." Turning to address the entire staff, his voice was steady yet carried across the room. "This past week, I've worked here as a new hire, and today I have some important announcements." Whispers spread quickly. A young server covered her mouth with her hand, while Carlos simply crossed his arms and leaned against the counter, his expression unreadable. Ethan paused for a beat, then continued. "This location will temporarily close for renovation and restructuring. All hourly employees will continue to be paid in full during this time." A female server called out, "So no one's being fired?" Ethan nodded. "Except management." Trevor shot to his feet. "You've got to be kidding." Samantha, emerging from the kitchen, froze in place. "On what grounds?" Ethan signaled to the attorney, who handed each of them a thick folder. "Embezzlement, falsifying records, food safety violations, harassment of staff. Do I need to go on?" His voice was even, his gaze unwavering. "We have everything from surveillance footage to documented evidence. Every time you altered a report, every conversation you had plotting to pin blame on Riley, I've seen it all." The room was heavy with silence. A few employees gave small nods, as if to confirm his words. Security stepped forward, instructing Trevor and Samantha to gather their belongings. Trevor tried to form a protest, but Samantha caught his arm, whispered something to him, and the 2 of them left quietly, leaving the room weighted with tension. Ethan drew a deep breath, sweeping his eyes over the remaining faces. "In 15 minutes, I want everyone in the main dining area. We're going to talk about the future of this place." As the staff dispersed, Carlos stepped close and murmured, "Riley called in this morning. Her father's taken a turn for the worse." Ethan gave a small nod. "All the better. We'll wait for her." At exactly 9 o'clock, nearly all the staff had gathered in the dining area. The tables and chairs had been cleared and straightened. The sound of knives on cutting boards and the scent of food were gone, leaving only an air that was equal parts anticipation and tension. Ethan stood in the center, quietly scanning the room. A few eyes still held suspicion, but most carried a look of expectation. The front door opened and Riley stepped inside. Her hair was pulled up high, dark circles shadowed her tired eyes, and her shoes clicked softly on the freshly mopped tile floor. Taking in the scene before her coworkers silent, the CEO standing in the middle of the room, Trevor and Samantha nowhere to be seen. She froze for a moment. Her eyes darted around as if searching for someone. "What's going on?" she asked cautiously. Carlos replied succinctly, "Full staff meeting. You should hear this." Riley moved forward slowly, her gaze settling on Ethan. "You're not the new hire," Ethan nodded. "No, I'm Ethan Cole, CEO of Harbor and Hearth." Her brow furrowed, a flicker of tension flashing across her face. "So this whole week you've been watching us?" Ethan's voice remained calm. "I've been finding out why a location that once led the chain has fallen into this state. And I found the answer." She crossed her arms, her tone edged with irony. "So you shut it down and replace everyone?" Ethan answered immediately. "Trevor and Samantha were terminated this morning." The location will close temporarily for renovations, but every hourly employee will continue to be paid in full. A few relieved breaths came from the back, but Riley's expression stayed cool. And after the remodel, we go back to the same system with new faces? Ethan took a step forward, meeting her eyes. That depends on whether the right person is willing to take responsibility. Riley blinked. You're saying? Yes, he replied. You've been running this place like a general manager all this time, but without the title, without the authority, without support. That ends today. He placed a folder on the table, a formal contract for the general manager position, with a salary that would cover her father's medical expenses, comprehensive health insurance, and a flexible work schedule. Riley picked it up, flipped through it, her eyes pausing on the bolded figure before looking up. This must be a mistake. Ethan shook his head. The only mistake was not recognizing your value sooner. Behind her, Carlos said quietly, Take it. A young female staffer whispered, You deserve it. Riley's shoulders dipped slightly, her eyes glistening, though she quickly brushed at them. Why? The question slipped out almost involuntarily. Ethan's answer was simple. Because you never gave up, even when no one stood beside you. The meeting that followed was unlike any Riley had ever experienced. Ethan didn't stand at a podium delivering a speech, nor did he bring along charts crammed with figures. He sat right at the round table with everyone else, his voice steady and direct. He spoke about what he had witnessed with his own eyes, the footage showing Trevor and Samantha embezzling funds, altering reports, and the fabricated complaints created to pin the blame on Riley. With every word he spoke, the room seemed to sink deeper into silence. A few employees lowered their heads, some clenched their fists, but no one looked away from him. When Ethan finished, he turned to Riley. This branch doesn't need saving from the outside. It just needs recognition for the leadership it already has. He placed a pen next to the contract still lying in front of her. Riley opened the papers once more. Her hand was steady, but her eyes were not. When she saw the terms for salary and benefits, she shook her head slightly. This can't be real. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but firm. If anything, it's overdue. The whole room waited. Riley stayed silent for so long that Carlos, from the back, blurted out, Sign it. A few quiet chuckles broke the tension. Riley took a deep breath and looked up. Any conditions? None. Flexible schedule, full health insurance, and medical support for your father. It's all in the contract. Something flickered in Riley's eyes. She pressed her lips together, then almost reflexively murmured, All right. Applause broke out, not loud, but resolute. Riley held the folder tightly against her chest, still not fully smiling, as if afraid a sudden gust might blow it all away. But when she looked up and met Ethan's gaze, the doubt began to give way to the first spark of trust. That afternoon, as the staff began packing up in preparation for the temporary closure and renovations, Ethan and Riley stayed behind. The clang of knives and cutting boards was gone, the hiss of the espresso machine silent, leaving only sunlight streaming through the windows and specks of dust drifting in the air. They walked the length of the floor, inspecting each section that needed changes. At the corner storage room, Ethan pointed toward the back wall. I want to change the layout here. You'll help draw up the plan. Riley raised an eyebrow. I've never designed a layout before. He replied without hesitation. You've run this entire restaurant without a title. I'm sure you can handle this too. She let out a small laugh, but it faded quickly into silence. As they passed the cashier station, Riley let her fingers brush across the POS screen. Feels strange to be recognized. Ethan nodded. And I'm sorry it took so long. She studied him for a moment, then asked bluntly, Why didn't anyone listen when I reported things before? Ethan exhaled. That was my fault. I created a system with too many layers of filters. Too often the truth was overlooked or ignored. Riley folded her arms. And people got hurt. I know, he answered, his voice heavier. The moment hung between them, weighted but no longer confrontational, just two people standing in an empty space, facing the reality in front of them. Then Riley unexpectedly smiled. "Thanks for not walking in here and yelling." Ethan smiled back. "Trust me, I wanted to." They both laughed briefly, this time with genuine relief. As the daylight faded, Riley put on her jacket and headed for the door. Before leaving, she paused. "I don't know what kind of manager I'll be. I've never worn that title before." Ethan replied slowly, "You've already carried the responsibility. The title is the easier part." She nodded, making no promises, but her eyes were less guarded now. "I'll make it worth it." With that, she stepped into the flow of people on the street, leaving Ethan standing beneath the glow of the newly lit street lamps, feeling with certainty that something had truly shifted, not just for the restaurant, but for her as well. 3 months had passed, and Brooklyn Harbor had transformed completely. On the day Ethan returned, a light drizzle fell, fine mist clinging to the dark fabric of his coat. He didn't announce his visit, simply walked in like any other guest and asked for a seat at the bar. The hostess smiled warmly. "Of course, Mr. Cole. Ms. Torres said you might stop by." He only nodded, not wanting to disturb the natural rhythm of the place. From his seat, he noticed everything ran smoothly. Staff moved in perfect sync, dishes arrived on time, customers chatted easily, and there wasn't the slightest trace of tension in the air. At the center of it all was Riley. She no longer walked with hurried steps, her shoulders weren't hunched, and her eyes no longer carried that guarded edge. Instead, she stood tall, her stride was steady, and her smiles warm enough to make guests feel truly welcomed. Ethan quietly observed as Riley stopped by a family's table. She gently pulled a small cupcake from behind her back, a slim candle perched on top. "Happy birthday, Princess." The little girl's eyes widened before breaking into a bright grin, her parents smiling just as wide. The bartender beside Ethan murmured, "She does that for every child who comes in. That's why people keep coming back." Riley still hadn't noticed him. She continued moving through the floor, checking dishes, speaking briefly with the new head chef, then stopping at the bar to exchange a few words with customers. Every step had purpose, but never felt rushed. When their eyes finally met, Riley paused for a heartbeat, then smiled naturally. "Mr. Cole, or should I say Ethan, want a tour?" They walked through the kitchen, now bright and orderly. Cooking stations were clearly defined, the floor gleamed, and shelves were neatly labeled. The head chef, once a line cook, now confidently directed the entire team. Riley pointed toward the storage corner. "We've implemented the weekly inventory checks you suggested. It's cut down quite a bit of waste." Ethan nodded, unable to hide his satisfaction. Finally, she led him to the back office, once Trevor's territory. Now the room was tidy, its walls adorned with photos of staff training sessions, a few internal certificates, and on the desk sat an old framed picture of her father. "He's doing much better now. The health insurance has helped me a lot," she said, her voice slow but warm. Ethan looked at her and realized this wasn't just a change in her work, it was a change in her entire life. On his way back to the lobby, Ethan stopped when he noticed a small plaque newly mounted beside the host stand. The engraved brass plate read, "Success is not only what you achieve, but who you lift along the way." He tilted his head slightly. "A new company motto?" Riley shook her head. "No, just a reminder for me and for them." She glanced toward the kitchen, where a few staff members were working while chatting easily. Ethan smiled. "I like it. Might bring it into the whole system if you'll allow it." Riley replied softly, "You're the CEO, you don't need my permission." "I'm asking," he said, "because this is something you created." A staff member hurried over and whispered something in Riley's ear. She immediately moved toward table 9, swiftly handling a special request from a guest before returning with her smile untouched. No scolding, no shifting of blame, only a focus on solving the problem and making everyone feel heard. Watching her, Ethan realized what he was witnessing was no longer the desperate struggle to stay afloat, but a steady, composed style of leadership. When he was ready to leave, Riley walked him to the door. "Next time, give me a heads up so I can prepare something special for you," she said. Ethan shook his head lightly. "I want to see everything just as it is." Before stepping out, his eyes caught on the silver pin at her lapel, the original Harbor and Hearth logo. He paused for a moment. "My father gave me that when we opened our first restaurant." Riley smiled. "He stopped by last month, said this place reminded him why he started." Ethan stepped outside into the light rain, carrying with him a rare, quiet warmth, a pride not just in a brand, but in a person who had made it something worth protecting. From the perspective of someone who has witnessed hundreds of businesses rise and fall, I believe that lasting change rarely begins with flashy strategies or reports filled with numbers. It begins with seeing, truly seeing the people quietly carrying the weight of the entire system on their shoulders, even when no one gives them a title or the spotlight. Riley didn't just save a restaurant, she proved that when you recognize true value and empower at the right moment, you don't just transform one person, you can revive an entire team. If this story has made you believe more in the power of recognition and trust, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next inspiring journeys. And before you go, leave a comment with the words "seeing you" as a reminder that sometimes the biggest change starts simply by stopping and truly looking.